Hello and welcome to today's episode of Chronicles of a Nigerian Woman. On today's episode, I'll be reading Promise's story. Take a listen. This story is about my mother, a legend and an Amazon. I hear many stories of women caving in under pressure, but not her. The most intriguing part of her is that she was one who believed strongly in culture and tradition and yet had all the attributes of a strong, fierce woman. I don't know how she combined two extreme traits in one person successfully. She was loved yet feared, feminine yet sturdy, a quintessential woman in mien yet atypical in mental capacity. I've said a lot already. Let me leave you to judge. My mother grew up in the village. Her father was an elder in the Presbyterian church, and her mother was a nurse. She had one sibling, a brother, to whom she has always been very close. My father also grew up in the same village, and according to him, Aniete was the girl everybody wanted to marry. She was a quiet person who kept mostly to herself, but she carried a joyful aura around her. You wouldn't typically find her among other young girls hanging around the village, but everyone who had any kind of interaction with her only had great things to say. She was kind, smart, respectful, and very well raised. It was her parents and my dad's parents who did the speaking to each other. She was 19 and had just finished her A-levels. She planned to go to a college of education. My father was 3 years older and had finished his college of education but wanted to go further to study law. His parents insisted that he got married before leaving the village. And being very good friends with my grandparents, they discussed their interest in my mother. My mother told us that she had always made up her mind to marry whoever her parents chose for her because she trusted their judgment. The courtship lasted 4 months before they got married. My dad stayed another 6 months in the village before going to start his degree in law. My mother was pregnant with me at this time and living with his parents. He traveled back and forth to see her periodically through the pregnancy and after I was born till I was 1 year old. She followed him back to Enugu from their village just outside Calabar and went to a teacher training college to fulfill her dream of becoming a teacher. The first college of education in the area came years later. My mother had 2 more children over the next 4 years, but it did not stop her from completing her studies and coming out as one of the best students in her class. I asked how she did it, and her answer was that where there is a will, there is always a way. Of course, my grandmothers on both sides came periodically to lend their support, but largely she managed through with the younger girl she got from Enugu. Did I mention that she also made and sold snacks to earn extra money? My father taught remedial classes to secondary school and teacher training college students, and that was how they survived. Growing up, I knew my mother as a nice and kind but firm and disciplined person. She always wore a smile and you never heard a bad word come out of her mouth. She was the one women in church looked up to for support, and she always had something to give. My father had 4 brothers, and he was the third, but my grandmother did not hide the fact that my mother was the favorite wife. My mother was a beautiful woman with thick coarse hair, light skin, and a moderate physique. She and my father were very, very, very close, and they drew me, my younger sister, and my brother into that circle. By the age of 10, I had heard their love story over and over till I was tired, even though I never said so. The soft and kind side of my mother was all I knew until my father died suddenly when I was 12. He left for work one morning and he never made it back home. Someone rushed to call my mother from the school where she was teaching that my father had slumped and been rushed to the hospital. When she came home that evening, her face said everything. Our dad was gone. I had never seen my mother sad, but that day she wept like a child. We all wept. The next morning, she got up and took charge of our home. It was clear that she was grieving because she wasn't her regular smiling self, but she had wiped her tears and she encouraged us all to take heart. Everyone rallied around us to bury my father. It was done about 2 weeks later. My grandparents, uncles, church members, colleagues, everybody was there to support us financially and morally. After the burial, my mother told us that we would be staying back in the village. According to the tradition, she could choose to marry any of her husband's brothers. My grandparents were not adamant about it. They asked her what she wanted and even gave her the option of leaving us with them if she wanted to remarry. She chose to become a wife to my father's eldest brother. He lived in Calabar and had a huge palm farm in the village. He was a kind man, but his wife was an aggressive woman who never really liked us. At that time, I did not understand the details, but my mom told us that she would be marrying him. I was apprehensive because I did not know what to expect. There was a lot of dust raised by my uncle's first wife over the next few weeks. Even though the marriage would not take place immediately because the mourning period had to be completed, the woman would come to my grandparents' house to shout and cause trouble, swearing that nobody would take her place, and insulting my mother with unprintable words. My mother turned deaf ears to her all through that time. Everyone in the family was angry with my aunt, but no one could stand up to her. Eventually, when the day of the ceremony came, she came that day to disrupt the ceremony. My mother was getting dressed when she heard my aunt shouting outside. My mother stepped out despite being advised against it. She walked up to my aunt, stared her in the eyes, and told her in a calm but firm way to shut her mouth and stop shouting. I think my aunt was surprised for a moment, and then my mother told everyone standing around them to leave. Nobody is sure what she said to my aunt that day, but the woman turned around without saying anything and she left. She stayed away and the ceremony took place. My mother refused to repeat her words to anybody, but I never saw my aunt speak to my mom till she died. We did not move into the same house with my uncle and his wife. He had another building within his compound, and that was where we stayed. On my mom's instruction, we never went into their apartment, and neither did my mom. My uncle came to check on us, and my mom served him food, but he never spent the night in our place. I understood as I grew that their marriage was never consummated. My mother continued to work as a teacher for several years, and I know that my uncle and grandparents supported her to care for us. My uncle never made any important decision without seeking my mother's opinion, and when his wife passed on about 25 years later, it was my mother who planned the entire burial. Everybody in my father's family loved my mom. My grandmother never wanted her to be far away, and she always said that the only good thing that came from my father's death was that her daughter came back home. Everyone listened to what my mother had to say, even though she was never one to push herself forward. My stepfather and my dad's other brothers all consulted with my mom before taking important decisions. The wife of the fourth son and my aunt, who became my stepmother, started the rumor that my mother was a witch who used her sorcery to get everyone on her side. My grandmother said to the hearing of everyone who cared to listen that she liked to be under that kind of witchcraft because it was used for the good of everyone. The day she died was the second time I saw my mother shed tears. Even my stepfather's children, my cousins, loved my mother in spite of the fact that their mother tried to keep them away. They were older than us and they often came into our apartment to spend time with us, even though we never went to theirs. My mother galvanized people in every space she entered, whether church, family, or work. Her reputation as a teacher was that her students feared her, but they loved her. No one wanted to be in her bad books. Under her tutelage, my siblings and I all went through university and got second degrees at her insistence. All our spouses and in-laws loved her. My mother passed away 5 years ago at the age of 67, and everyone mourned her. We were shocked to find out that she had bought 3 properties in Calabar, leaving 1 to each of us. We never had any idea or could have imagined that my mother had that kind of money. If I can be half the woman my mother was, I will be a very fulfilled person. I guess only one of such people is made per generation. I'm just glad to have been her child. What a sweet story about a legendary woman. Do you know any legendary women? Would you care to share their stories? Please do so in the comments below. Have you heard about the Valiant Women's Network? It's a community of women where we come together to celebrate one another, to learn, and to help one another grow and thrive. If you'd like to be a part of us, please do so in the link in the description box below. Do remember to like this video, to share it with someone who will find it useful, and definitely remember to subscribe to my channel. Till I come your way again next time. Ciao!